Do you ever feel conflicted? If you're a human being, chances are the answer is yes. Today we're going to be unpacking and exploring the myriad of oppositions within ourselves and in the culture, which are many these days, and explore why it's so important to hold the tension between the opposites and to increase our capacity to hold the complexity of our own psyches and also the world around us. My name is Leanna Yip, and I'm a registered clinical counselor. If you like this video, please give it a like and share, much appreciated. So the psyche has many aspects. And within the psyche, there are going to be parts of ourselves that say yes to things. And whenever there is a yes, there is also an opposing no, and vice versa. That these pairs of opposites come together. The thing is, we can't always see them. I would go as far to say it's pretty rare to see the opposite within ourselves, because often it lies within what Jung would call our shadows. So, for example, in my practice and in general, I notice that it is very common to identify with a certain type of being. For example, I'm not this type of person. I'm not an angry person. I'm an anxious person. And so the danger in identifying with one way of being is that we can't see the other, right? And also, we're giving this aspect of psyche all of our autonomy. And so it's important to start to question, okay, and notice where these identifications are taking place. So for example, I was thinking about where holding the tension of the opposite shows up in my life. And it shows up a lot, There's a part of me that is super stoked about doing these videos. There's another part of me that's like, what are we doing here? And would way rather be, in pajamas, in bed, wherever. Would rather be anywhere but here. Same with, getting to work. I love what I do. I feel it is aligned with purpose and meaning for me, and I have no question about the work that I do. And there's a part of me that just doesn't like working. So when we can see these pairs of opposites without judgment, we can create space between us and them, and we can make room for discernment. So if we're not aware of these opposites within ourselves, what happens is that the unconscious part of the pair gets acted out through us unconsciously. So for example, for folks who may identify as not an angry person, whatever repressed anger may exist, and for sure it does, because anger is part of the human experience, may get acted out in passive aggression, reactivity, explosions, things like this. And for folks who maybe identify as an anxious person or a depressed person, that is, it can be very limiting, right? And there are many reasons why this happens. We can't go too far into it for the sake of time in this YouTube video. But the main thing to circle around is to notice where we are rigidly holding on to certain ways of being, certain opinions. There's a lot of different opinions in here, and our rational minds need to understand, or they think they need to understand, right? And so to make sense of the world, we categorize. We say we're like this, that person's like that, and often the rational mind thinks in either or black and white, right? And so by holding the tension that arises by recognizing the complexity of our psyches and of the world, we are growing this muscle to be able to not only be with attention, but to discern. Our capacity to discern increases. We are no longer being puppets to our unconscious psychic aspects or impulses, whatever lies underneath, right? So, but we are able to have the space to see the numerous conflicting opinions and choose. So I rode my bike to work today in the pouring rain, and in fact I've done it in the pouring rain for the last 3 times because it's just been raining. And there's a part of me that just hates it. And it's like, why am I out here in the pouring rain, in the traffic, subjecting myself to the elements? Wouldn't it be way easier to take the bus or drive? But when I can see that aspect of myself, God knows why, I can consciously choose to ride my bike. It no longer has power over me. Whereas a few years back, I drove everywhere. And I probably would have said that I could never, I could never bike in the rain on the road, or, there's a certain power that we reclaim when we can see these aspects of psyche that are opposite. And in that case, I am gradually becoming more conscious of an aspect of myself that maybe even enjoys biking in the rain, And so that we can, and this is a very kind of superficial example, and yet I think that it can be relatable because this happens all the time, every day, and then we feel bad. What I noticed too is that we feel bad when we identify with one or the other, right? Then the shoulds come in, like, for example, I'm not an athletic person, but I should be. I see all these people out biking to work in the rain, and I should be able to do that, right? And so when we're holding on to one of the opposites, one or the other, then destructive kind of narratives can emerge. The shoulds come up in order to maintain our grip or identification with that aspect of ourselves, right? And so the work is really to build the capacity to hold the complexity of numerous, multiple conflicting opinions, emotions, knowing that one doesn't cancel out the other, right? You can both feel immense gratitude and rage towards somebody. We choose the positive, right? Choice may not be the right word, but like gratitude and love. Like, I feel gratitude and love for this person, and therefore I should not feel anger and rage. And yet, when we invite that anger in and recognize it, then it has less control over us. But if we're just focusing on the love and gratitude, then we should all over ourselves if there is any anger or anything other than, rainbows and sunshine and positivity. And toxic positivity is for another video. If we look at the culture right now, there is a lot of divisiveness, right? We can see polarities. For example, a pole that perhaps clings rigidly to science, almost putting science, as putting it on a pedestal like a god in some way. And then, anti-vaxxers, for example, right? Wherever one exists, the opposite will need to exist, right? So if we're clinging on to something so tightly, then the opposite constellates. Where the work needs to be in the culture, or without getting too rigid about it, is this ability to hold complexity. Because if we're not able to hold complexity within the culture right now, what happens is that the cycle, it fuels the fire of the cycle, right? So Jung, circling back to Jung's concept of the transcendent function, or holding the tension of the opposites, the idea is that we are able to be with the discomfort of the opposites for long enough until a greater third emerges, and the opposites dissolve into this greater third. Something previously unconscious rises to consciousness. A third option, an idea, an insight of how to move forward, for example, that we just weren't conscious of before. And this holding the tension of the opposites is how consciousness grows. We're not able to get to the greater third, the transformation, the growth, if we are clinging to either pole or either opposite. And that goes for both internal processes, right, and external. I've given you a lot to chew on in these couple minutes. I would urge you to start to recognize where perhaps you are identifying with certain ways of being, or perhaps where they have possession of you, and start to recognize the opposite, that the opposite exists within you also. And to notice also, whether that's scrolling through your social media or listening to the news or friends, or wherever it's coming from in the culture, notice where perhaps there is a white knuckle holding onto certain belief systems, and recognizing that the opposite also exists in you, and being able to build that muscle, right? Working towards building the muscle to hold the complexity, to hold the tension until the insight comes, the transformation, the growth, the greater third appears.